This is a shard of glass, but this is not a shard of ceramic. Okay, well, it is, but archaeologists wouldn't call it that. We would call it a sherd. But why? When I was a freshman in college, I had this same question. When I asked one of the TAs at my field school, they said that their professor told them that the reason archaeologists make that distinction is because of the way ceramic and glass break. However, when you look into it, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. While yes, glass and ceramic can break differently, even just different types of glass can break in drastically different ways, and the same goes for ceramic. And certain types of ceramic break pretty much the same way as certain types of glass. So that explanation doesn't really make sense. So I decided I wanted to figure out why archaeologists use this term. And a lot of places give the explanation that we call them sherds, but we don't really explain why. The word sherd is really just a shortening of the word potsherd, which means exactly what it sounds like, a fragment of pottery. Sherd and shard pretty much have the same origin, but the word sherd seems to come from a Middle English variation of the word shard. The first use is in the 14th century, and I could find two early historic records of the word sherd. The first that I could actually get access to was John Wycliffe's English translation of the Bible. He uses this word in his translation of Isaiah chapter 30, verse 14. He very clearly puts it, "And it shall be made lessa, as the galdon of a potter is broken with full strong breaking, and a sherd shall not be founden on the globitus thereof, in which sherd a little fear shall be born of Brenian, either a little of ware shall be drawn of the ditch." Yeah, if you've never tried reading Old English, emphasis on the word tried is a completely different language, and apparently it makes you do a Swedish accent. If you're curious what this sounds like in more modern English, a New International Version translation puts the verse like this: "It will break in pieces like pottery, shattered so mercilessly, that among its pieces not a fragment will be found for taking coals of a hearth, of scooping water out of a cistern." And interestingly, we actually see the term potsherd be used in the translation of Isaiah chapter 45, verse 9, where it says, "Woe to those who quarrel with the maker, those who are nothing but potsherds among the potsherds on the ground. Does the clay say to the potter, 'What are you making?' Does your work say, 'The potter has no hands'?" But interestingly, when we see John Wycliffe's Middle English translation in the 14th century, he says this: "Woe to him that e'en saith his maker, a teal stone of earth of sayness, where clay saith to the potter, 'What makest thou?' and thy work is within houndus." I just found it interesting how NIV translates one verse with the word sherd that Wycliffe did not, and vice versa. If you're curious what the original term in the Hebrew was, it's the term herez, which is probably best translated as earthenware vessel or pottery, but in the context, the pottery is broken, so I can understand why Wycliffe would have chosen to use the word sherd. But what about that other early use of the word? Apparently there's another 14th century document that uses the word sherd, but I couldn't find it anywhere. Apparently it's something that talks about antiques, but I couldn't find it, so I have to use a 17th century document, which does use the word sherd in reference to these same antiques. So yeah, I don't really count that as an early source, but it's what I could find. So now that we know where the word sherd came from, it's best to ask, well, when did archaeologists start using it? Turns out they were using it very early on. The field of archaeology really started to be defined in the later 19th century, and looking at articles from that time, yep, they're using the word sherd. Since there is that 17th century article that uses the word sherd in talking about antiques, it might be the case that some archaeologists saw this and started using the word as well. I would not put a lot of faith into that theory though, because it's pretty much based on nothing. The theory that I think makes more sense is just that since there is a word to describe broken pieces of pottery, of course archaeologists are going to use that word. They're probably the ones dealing with this stuff more than anybody else. While it might not seem useful to separate the broken bits of ceramic and glass, it does kind of make sense in an archaeological context. It makes it a little bit clearer when you're talking about broken pieces of ceramic as opposed to glass. When someone asks, "Oh, how many shards did you find?" Well, you know they're not talking about ceramics. But when they ask how many sherds, well, then obviously they're talking about ceramics. The semantic difference is pretty much useless for most people, but for archaeologists, it can actually be kind of nice. And overall, it's really not that big of a deal. So yeah, why do archaeologists call them sherds? Well, my guess is just because it's a word that describes the thing that they're talking about, and early archaeologists were using it, and it became popular. It's pretty much that simple. So if you're ever at a historic site or a museum, make sure to call it a sherd and not a shard. It'll make you sound smart. But really, nobody cares outside of academia and archaeology, so yeah, just kind of call it whatever you want. Thank you so much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed the video. It was fun doing the research on this one. I have a few videos on the channel, and I have a whole lot more planned, so if you're interested in those, go check them out and subscribe for future stuff. Thank you again, and have a wonderful day. Okay, I just want to make it abundantly clear to all of you. I'm doing this in my kitchen. Don't do this at home.